Hello, everyone. My name is Alyssa Rickey, and welcome to the second webinar in our series about the UFLI Foundations implementation. Today's webinar will focus on how to implement the day one steps of the lesson, so steps 1 through 5. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be available on the UFLI YouTube channel later this week. The recording of our first webinar from this series is already up there on the YouTube channel. Before we get started, let's go over a few logistics. First, I'm sure several of you are anxiously awaiting your manuals you've ordered. If you have any questions about your order status, please contact our publisher, Ventris Learning. Their contact information can be found on their website, but it can also be found on our website. Second, if you have any questions for our panelists and host today, please post them in the Q&A chat instead of the Q&A function instead of the chat box. There's going to be a lot of people here tonight, and it's a lot easier for us to answer them in the Q&A rather in the chat. They can kind of get lost. If you want to say where you're from, add it in the chat as we get started. The behind the scenes team, it's a lot easier to answer them in the Q&A function. So with that, I would like to welcome the authors of the UFLI Foundations programs and our host, Dr. Holly Lane and Dr. Valentina Contess. Welcome, ladies. So excited.
Thanks, Allie, and welcome everyone. It's nice to see you tonight. We are ready to get going to talk about how to implement the day one part of the lesson. So as you know, we had an implementation overview last week, and that video, as Allie mentioned, is already posted on our YouTube channel. So please do go and watch that. That gives you some general guidance for implementing UFLI Foundations, things that we may touch on or refer to tonight, but we're not going to go into depth. Those are all covered thoroughly in that first webinar. Tonight's focus is really going to be just on the lesson steps. So to get us started, remember in your manual, you've got a whole section on implementation that really takes you through each of the different parts of the program. And so we're going to very quickly go over a little bit of that, but again, focusing in on the lesson steps. So in the manual, you will find your scope and sequence. And as we go through tonight, you will see down in the bottom right-hand corner of a number of the different slides, a page number. So if you've got your manual handy, you can flip to that page number and see what we're showing if you want a closer look at it. So our scope and sequence is a really important part of the program. This lays out for you the topics of each of the lessons. And as you know, probably by now, the scope and sequence is continuous all the way from kindergarten through second grade. And we do have a suggested lesson sequence. Those are on the subsequent pages. This is our kindergarten suggested sequence, the lessons that we recommend you teach in kindergarten. Obviously, if your students are ready to move on beyond that, you are more than welcome to keep going. In first grade, these are the lessons that we recommend. If your students need more of the earlier lessons or are ready to move on to some of the later lessons, you are certainly free to do that. And the same with our second grade suggested sequence. Our books, our lessons begin with our getting ready lessons. And we do recommend that everyone, no matter what grade level you're using this with, that you do reference these lessons. These include guidance for the sound wall and also introduce alphabet knowledge and letter formation. We do not expect that these lessons, the information about the letters, will lead to mastery of those letters. That's not their purpose. The idea is that they will introduce kindergartners or older students who don't know their letters yet, introduce them to the letter names. They will come back and learn a lot more about each letter in the lessons, in the alphabet lessons. But these lessons will get you started. And if you have older students, second graders, or even some first graders, you may not need to go through all of the alphabet knowledge and letter formation in as much detail, but that is there for kids who do need it. This is also the time that you're going to be able to build instructional routines and teach students to manage their materials. So during these lessons, you'll introduce the sound wall. There's an example of what the sound wall should look like in the manual. And there's also an abbreviated format for the lesson formation guidance. So if you aren't going into great detail through the whole Getting Ready lesson, you can refer to these pages to get a better sense of how to introduce letter formation. Here's an example of one of our Getting Ready lessons. And as you can see, it's got those two main parts, sound wall and the alphabet knowledge and letter formation. And it comes with a set of slides that this particular lesson focuses on strokes, vertical, horizontal, slanted lines. And in a little bit later Getting Ready lesson, this is actually forming uppercase letters. So the lessons progress pretty quickly. You might choose to take a Getting Ready lesson over more than one day, but these are really designed to be implemented in one day, as opposed to the core lessons that are designed to be stretched across 2 days. During these Getting Ready lessons, you're going to want to be preparing your classroom, getting kids used to where they're going to be for different parts of the lesson and how to manage their materials. In kindergarten, as you probably know, if you teach kindergarten, you need to go over every little detail, including how to make sure that the cap is on your dry erase marker and you hear that click to make sure that it closes and your marker doesn't dry out. You all also want to prepare your students, helping them understand the behavioral expectations for each part of the lesson and the routines, the transitions that you'll be using during the lesson and how to manage those materials and also how to respond. Establishing gestures and responses from the beginning of the year is a really important piece of this. So how your students respond, whether they're going to show you their answer on a whiteboard, whether they're going to respond chorally, they're going to repeat after you, they're going to respond to a signal. These are things that are really helpful to get established from the beginning. We honestly don't care what gestures you're using or what particular things you say. Whatever works for you in your classroom is fine. You just want to have a routine so that the kids don't have to wonder what they're supposed to do. One of the beautiful things about these lessons is that there's such a predictable routine. To adults, that might sound boring, but we have gotten a lot of feedback from teachers and kids that the routines are one of their favorite things about these lessons, that they can focus on the content of the lesson because they understand the activities. They know what's expected of them. It's just now applying this with a new skill. So establishing good instructional routines is an incredibly important part of this. But you want the routines to fit you and to be comfortable for you. In some of the lessons, you'll see things like make a gesture for a particular type of sound, a continuous sound or a stop sound, or you decide what is a gesture that will make sense to communicate that idea. So in the manual, there's a whole section about implementation guidance that starts on page 16. And in that section, there's some important things. You can see the diagrams right there. One of them is the suggested breakdown of the 90-minute reading block. UFLI Foundations is designed to address the decoding side of learning how to read. The idea is that you'll use other materials to address the language comprehension side. We do recommend that each of those takes about 30 minutes of your 90-minute reading block, and that middle time is your time to differentiate. So to provide small group supplemental support for kids who need it, and also enrichment for kids who are ready to move on. As I mentioned, the UFLI Foundations lessons are divided over 2 days. So over the course of a typical week, you would address concept 1 during Monday and Tuesday, and concept 2 on Wednesday and Thursday, and then Friday would be reserved for review and assessment. So each of our core lessons has 8 steps, and these 8 steps stay pretty much the same through all the lessons. There's some slight variations when you get to different types of concepts like morphemes or multisyllabic words. Some of the directions are slightly different, but for the most part, the steps are exactly the same for most of the lessons. So the idea is that we divide the lesson across 2 days, and steps 1 through 5 are taught during day 1. And then day 2 begins with a review of step 5 and then goes through steps 6, 7, and 8. So the way that we think about this is those first 4 steps are designed for warm up and review and to get students ready to learn the new concept. And as you can see, day 1, that 30 minutes of UFLI Foundations time is divided pretty much in half between the warm up and review time and then introduction of the new concept. So each part, those first 4 steps combined is about 15 minutes and the new concept is about 15 minutes. On day 2, the new concept review is very quick. And then you spend a lot of time applying the new concept in reading and spelling words, and then in reading and writing connected text. And again, there's about a 15-minute combination of 5, 6, and 7. And then step 8 is 15 minutes on its own. So the amount of time that you spend on each step, we think is pretty important. We recommend that you don't spend 45 minutes or an hour slowing down and doing these things a lot slower, because the pace really is important for developing kids' automaticity. We want to get them to the point where they can respond quickly and don't take a lot of time to get through this. On the other hand, if you're only spending 15 or 20 minutes for getting through steps 1 through 5, you're probably not giving kids nearly enough practice. So we really have spent a lot of time and effort getting the time amounts pretty exact. So you want to try to stay as close to the recommended times as you can. So when you're teaching your lessons, you're going to need your lesson plan, and the lesson plan has all 8 steps laid out for you. And here's an example of a later lesson plan, one for morphemes, introducing morphemes. Each lesson plan has an accompanying slide deck as well. You will also need to teach these lessons some form of manipulative letters. We prefer magnetic letters. These tend to be easiest for kids to move quickly and to keep organized on the board. The word mat is another great alternative. These are Velcro tiles, just cardstock printed. And we've got the template for creating those available on the UFLI Foundations toolbox. You'll also need to have a writing surface and a writing utensil for every child. So the most common one that our teachers in our pilot schools used was a dry erase board and marker. Paper and pencil is fine. Some teachers had kids write on their tables with the dry erase marker. That worked well too. If you haven't yet visited the Foundations Toolbox, we encourage you to go ahead and do that. There are a lot of the things in the other tools are things that we're still adding, but we do have available the UFLI apps already, and you will see how those get applied in the steps as we go through them. There's also a place where you can download this, what we call our little cheat sheet, the lesson planning and implementation support guide. This is a quick overview of each step of the lesson. If I were using Foundations in a classroom today, I would print this out, double-sided, laminate it, have it with me all the time, put it in a sheet protector or whatever, have it out and ready so that while I'm getting familiar with the lesson steps, I can refer to this. What am I supposed to be doing? What material do I need for this? This just puts it all in one place, very easily accessible. And it goes through each of the steps for both day 1 and day 2. Also, you've got lesson resources. For this, you actually have to scroll down. We've had some people say, where are the lesson slides? You have to scroll down until you get to the buttons that have each unit laid out. And so these are the units that are the scope and sequence is organized by. And if you just click on one of those buttons, it'll take you to all of the materials for the lessons in that particular unit. So this is the alphabet review and longer words unit resources. And on here, you've got, for each concept, you've got a slide deck, and the slide deck is available in both PowerPoint and Google Slides format. You have decodable passages, you have home practice activities, and you also have other additional activities. Right now, we have roll and read games. We will be adding additional activities later on. So the slide decks, as I mentioned, are available in both PowerPoint and Google Slides format. And if you haven't already noticed, just today we added a slide deck tutorial. This is available on our YouTube channel, and I believe there's also a link now on the website for this. And this is super helpful so that you'll know how to actually use the slide deck in connection with each step of the lesson. So we'll be referring to it, but we're not going to guide you through all of the little components to it. I really highly recommend that you watch the slide deck tutorial video. Also in the lesson resources section, this is some of the home practice activity and the decodable passages that are available. Here's an example of the roll and read game. We'll also have word cards that you can use for board games. And now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Valentina Contest. Let me give her remote control of my screen so she can take us through the first steps in day one.
Thanks, Holly, and welcome everyone. Feel free to comment in the chat or use the Q&A as questions come up as we present more information about the steps in day one. As Holly mentioned, we will be using the SH sample lesson that's found on pages 168 and 169 as we discuss each of the steps in day one. So we'll be discussing the phonemic awareness step, the visual drill step, the auditory drill step, the blending drill step, and ending with the new concept step. As Holly mentioned, each of the lessons has accompanying a slide deck that can be found as PowerPoint or Google Slides. And the first slide for each of the lesson slide decks includes both the lesson number and the concept. As Holly mentioned, there is a tutorial now available in further utilizing the lesson slides, and you can find that link in the chat. The video discusses in greater detail the symbol key and how we use this to support your use of the slides throughout the lesson. So very quickly, if you see the red box, that means that no additional slides are needed. If it's the teal icon, that means that we suggest using the slides in editing mode or just normal viewing mode. If it's the orange icon, it means that the slide should be used in slideshow view. And if there is the blue web browser icon, that means that you should either be sharing a website or some other type of resource. So once again, the core lesson includes 8 steps, beginning with the warm-up and review steps, steps 1 through 4, then the introduction of the new concept, step 5, word work and irregular words in steps 6 and 7, and then ending with connected text. Today, we will be discussing steps 1 through 5, which are in the day 1 lesson. Here's the day 1 and day 2 broken up with those approximate times yet again. And just a reminder, and again, the slide deck tutorial goes into more detail about this, but each slide deck has the lesson slides for both day 1 and day 2. So there are transition slides that are important to note here on the screenshot. So to discuss more of day 1, as Holly previously mentioned, steps 1 through 4 are intended to be quick warm-up steps. So these should take approximately 15 minutes altogether in order to devote at least 15 minutes to teaching the new concept and allowing students multiple opportunities to practice with that new concept. So here's what the visual schedule looks like for day 1. Again, students engage in the phonemic awareness drill, the visual drill, the auditory drill, the blending drill, and end with learning the new concept. So to talk about the first step, phonemic awareness, again, this is the first step that allows students to warm up and for the lesson. As far as teacher materials, all you will need is the information on your lesson plan, and students do not need any materials. They're engaging by listening and by using their fingers to segment sounds. This step should take approximately 2 minutes, so it is a very quick step to warm up. For this step, first, you'll engage your students in blending phonemes in order to form full words. So you will orally segment the word into individual phonemes or sounds. For example, I, sh, and then students chorally blend those phonemes to form the full word by saying fish. It's very helpful whenever possible to use connected phonation to support student blending. So instead of saying ish, saying fish to help them blend those sounds together. This warm-up is a great activity to do for decoding or reading because students will need to be able to blend phonemes when they are reading words. The second part of the phonemic awareness step is phoneme segmentation. So for this, you will orally present the word and students will repeat the word and chorally segment into individual phonemes. For example, you would say the word shin. Students will repeat the word shin and then segment into individual sounds. Sh, I, n, and then they can repeat the word again, shin. So the goal of this is for students to first hear the whole word and then be able to segment or separate the individual phonemes or sounds they hear in the word. And this activity is a great warm-up for encoding or spelling because when students spell or encode words, they need to be able to hear each individual sound in the word in order to represent it with the letter or letter combinations that they know for that sound. So the phonemic awareness step typically highlights that phoneme that is used as part of the grapheme phoneme correspondence in the upcoming new concept introduction or step 5. So this lesson is the SH lesson. And so you'll notice that the words chosen for the phonemic awareness step target that phoneme, the sh phoneme. Another thing you'll notice here is that we have tried for blending to always begin with words that have continuous sounds at the beginning, like you see here with fish and rush and ship and shut. Another thing you'll notice is that whenever possible, we try to list these in order from least to most complex at the bottom, like you see here with shin versus brush at the bottom of the list. Here's a video example of a teacher engaging her students in this step. And Holly, I don't think that we can hear. I think it might be because you're muted. Let's start it over.
Good. Fantastic. Now we're going to switch and I'm going to tell you the word and you are going to tell me each sound and we're going to use our pounded sound. So watch me. The word is shin. Let's try it together. Ready? Shin. Fantastic.
So something you saw in the video is that the teacher used the strategy of pound and sound for that phoneme segmentation. So she had the students pound the word by saying the whole word shin, and then prompted the students to use their fingers to segment each individual sound. So once again, shin, sh, I, n. So later in the scope and sequence, when students begin to read and spell multisyllabic words, we also have blending and segmenting using these multisyllabic words. But for blending these multisyllabic words, students will first blend the phonemes in each syllable and then blend the 2 syllables together to say the whole word. So first you would present the phonemes for rain, r, a, n. Students would say rain, and then b, o. Students would say bow, and then you would present rainbow, and students would say rainbow. So this is the same type of process that we would want students to use when they're decoding or reading multisyllabic words. For segmenting, students would first segment each individual syllable or first they would segment the whole word into the 2 individual syllables and then segment each syllable into each individual phoneme. For example, that you would say the word teaspoon and students would segment into syllables, teaspoon, and then would segment e and spoon to segment again each syllable into each individual phoneme. Again, for this lesson step, the symbol key tells you to just share this screen and no other slides are necessary for this step, like you saw in the video example. Once again, the phonemic awareness step is a very quick step. It should take approximately 2 minutes. Students are engaging in phoneme blending. So you are presenting individual phonemes and the students are blending those phonemes to say a whole word. And this is a great warm up for decoding or reading. And then students are also engaging in phoneme segmentation where you're saying the whole word and students are segmenting into individual phonemes like you see here with shin, sh, I, n. And this is a great warm up for encoding or spelling. Our next step is the visual drill. For the visual drill, you will be utilizing the lesson slides in the slide deck. So these are grapheme slides, and students will be responding by saying the grapheme and then the phoneme that represents that grapheme. Like you see here with A spells ah. This step should take approximately 3 minutes. So once again, for this step, you'll be presenting each selected grapheme. The graphemes listed in the lesson plan will match the slides in your slide deck. So the same graphemes we see on the lesson plan are represented as grapheme cards or slides in the lesson slide deck. Students will respond when they see the grapheme slide by saying the name of the letter or letter combination and then following that with its sound. So for example, if they saw the letter D on the slide, they would say D spells D. After the students have learned additional phonemes associated with any grapheme based on the scope and sequence, they would include all of these in the response. So for example, if they have learned both sounds for C, they would say C spells K and C spells S. Another example that you see here in the lesson on the screen is for the grapheme S. At this point in the scope and sequence, students have learned both phonemes S and Z to represent that grapheme. So when students see that S on the screen, when they're presented with that grapheme, they would say both phonemes or sounds that they have learned for that grapheme. Here's a video of a teacher engaging her students in the visual drill.
S says and. Y says and I and. Good job. Short. A says short. E says.
In the video, you saw the teacher prompt with number 2, the 2 sounds that the students knew at this point in the scope and sequence for S. So the student said S spells S and Z. You also saw the teacher use articulatory gestures to prompt the 3rd sound for Y. And additionally, she did prompt the students that she was asking for the short vowel sound. And you will notice on the lesson slide here where we see the vowels, they do have the symbol for short vowel sound. Another thing to mention in the video is that the teacher is using those gestures that Holly mentioned. So once again, you don't need to do a specific gesture, but it is important to have some way to communicate to your students that you're expecting a choral response. So for all students to be able to say the grapheme and the phoneme or phonemes associated with that grapheme. This allows for all students to be able to participate in the activity and all students to have that opportunity to practice and review these graphemes. In the video that you saw, the students were seated on the carpet, but this is an activity that can also be done with students sitting at their desk, like you see here in the picture. Here's a closer look at the slide deck for the visual drill. Once again, all of the graphemes listed on the lesson plan match the slides in the slide deck. So the pacing of the graphing presentation and students' responses is really important. The purpose of the visual drill is to help students build automaticity with grapheme phoneme correspondences. So students should be responding with the phonemes pretty quickly. If students hesitate for more than 1 or 2 seconds, you should review that grapheme because that means that it's not quite automatic for the student or students yet. If students provide an incorrect response, it's important to do a correction procedure using gradual release with the whole group. So first you would model the correct response, then you would guide students in saying the correct response, and finally ask the students for a core response without the teacher support. This can even be for things like making sounds blendable. So for example, if students say A says ah, and that is correct, but we want them to make sure that they are making that sound continuous, we would say, close, watch me, A spells ah. Let's try together. A spells. Now you try it without me and have the students try it on their own without that teacher support. For this step, it's very important that you utilize the slides in presentation mode so that students only see one grapheme displayed at a time. Once again, this step is another pretty quick warm-up step. It should take approximately 3 minutes. For this, you're presenting the grapheme on the slide, and students are orally responding by saying the grapheme, so either the letter or letter combination followed by its sound. So for a 2-letter grapheme, students would say CK spells K. And once again, this is a step that really reinforces grapheme phoneme correspondences and automaticity with these grapheme phoneme correspondences. Our next step is the auditory drill. For this step, you are presenting phonemes or sounds to the students, and students will need something to respond with. So we recommend either a whiteboard and marker or paper pencil. And as students are responding, they're also repeating the sound and connecting that sound or phoneme to the grapheme that they're writing. This step should take approximately 5 minutes. We have devoted a little longer to this step because we know writing is more laborious for our students in the primary grades. So for this step on the lesson plan, you'll see phonemes listed. So in bold, you'll see phonemes, and in parentheses, you'll see the graphemes that students have learned up to this point in the scope and sequence. So for example, for the phoneme K, students have learned C, K, and CK to represent that phoneme or sound. For this step, you'll say the sound, again, what's bolded in the lesson plan, and students will repeat the sound while forming the letter or letter combination. So if you presented the sound D, students would repeat D is D while writing on their whiteboard or paper. Additionally, letter formation could take place with the finger on the table or the carpet, especially in kindergarten as students are learning about letter formation and how to use those writing utensils. Once again, in the lesson plan, it's really important for you to note what phoneme students which grapheme students should be representing based on the phoneme that you are presenting. Like we saw with the example of K, students at that point in the scope and sequence know 3 spellings or 3 graphemes for that phoneme. Here's a video of a teacher guiding her students through this step.
The next sound is spell. Is good. Erase your boards.
So in the video, you heard that the teacher presented the sound and the students repeated the sound and then said the grapheme or letter that represents that sound.
The next sound is
students, once they learn multiple spellings for a phoneme, so multiple graphemes, they would write both of those on the whiteboard. Like you see here for the phoneme OI, students have learned OI and OY to represent that phoneme or sound. Here's some pictures of other materials or are other ways that students can respond during that step. In the video, we saw students utilizing their desk as whiteboards. Of course, a traditional whiteboard also works. Many of our teachers in our pilot schools use plastic sleeves with cardstock in them to use this step. Teachers also sometimes use document cameras to project what they are providing as error correction or responses on the board. So just like with the visual drill, pacing is really important in the auditory drill. So the pace of your sound presentation and students' response is very important. Like the visual drill, the auditory drill, the focus of it is to build automaticity with grapheme phoning correspondences. So students should be responding quickly with the graphemes that they know for the phoneme that you're presenting. If a student hesitates with what the grapheme is, we should practice that grapheme again, and again, that connection to the phoneme. And if students have an incorrect response with letter formation, it's important to model the correct letter formation, emphasizing where to begin for that letter, which direction to move, and then where to finish that letter. For the lesson slide decks, you'll have one transition slide for the auditory drill, and then a blank slide that, again, you can use for error correction or to model letter formation. So for the auditory drill, we should be spending approximately 5 minutes on this step. Once again, for this step, you'll be presenting a phoneme, and students are forming the graphemes that they know for that phoneme that you've presented while saying the sound. So A is A, sh is SH, or k is C, k is K, and k is CK, as an example of a phoneme that students know multiple graphemes for. This step, just like the visual drill, reinforces grapheme phoning correspondences, and the goal is to build automaticity with these grapheme phoning correspondences. Our next step and our last part of the warm-up and review section of the lesson is the blending drill. For this, you'll be utilizing the UFLI Blending Board app, and one of our team members will be linking that app in the chat. You will also need the word chain that is provided on your lesson plan, and we'll take a closer look at that in just a minute. Students do not need any materials for this. They will be looking at the words that you're presenting, and they will be segmenting and blending those sounds to read the words. This step should take approximately 5 minutes. So for this step, the teacher is going to, you are going to point to each grapheme as the students chorally say each sound. So if the word on the screen was snack, the students would say snack, and then you will sweep your finger or pointer across the graphemes, and the students will say the whole word snack. You will, once again, be using the word chains provided in the lessons to change one part of the word at a time. Occasionally, the word chains do include nonsense words. It's important to note that these are nonsense words for the students. Also, if there are specific words in the word chain that require a brief student-friendly definition, it is okay to do that, even though these lessons target the decoding part of the equation. Of course, if we have vocabulary words embedded in these word chains, it's perfectly fine to provide, once again, brief student-friendly definitions for these words. For each lesson, the word chain is provided in the lesson plan. You are welcome to modify that provided word chain or develop your own in order to best meet the needs of your students. But if you are modifying or developing your own, it's important that you're only including previously learned graphemes in this word chain. So we very carefully develop these word chains to only include previously learned graphemes. Another key component of these word chains is that you'll notice here on the left, underneath the word chain, there's a grid that will help you set up your Blending Board app. What you'll notice here is in the final placement, CK is bolded. CK is bolded because that was the concept that was taught prior to this current lesson. And so that concept is very important to review because students have very recently learned it. So you'll notice in this word chain that CK is targeted, and there are a lot of words that allow students to practice and review with that CK grapheme. Whenever possible, use connected phonation to help students make those continuous sounds so that they have an easier time blending these sounds as they blend words. Here's a quick video of a teacher using the UFLI blending board to guide students through the blending drill. It was a little bit hard to hear, but what you heard is the students segmenting the sounds and then blending the sounds. As you could see, it's very easy for the teacher to change the word by clicking on the app, and we'll take a closer look at how the app functions in just a minute. This is what the app looks like. And so you'll notice that the word that you're building is always at the top, so very easy for the students to see. And then the tiles that you see in blue, yellow, green, and pink are ones that you are manipulating, you are changing in order to create words for your students. Another feature of the app is as you create words, the words list here on the right side of the app. So the blue tiles represent initial sounds. So the only sounds that you'll see as a blue tile are sounds that can go in the initial place of a word. Yellow is medial sounds. Green is final sounds. And then in pink, we have tiles for silent E or S at the end of words. If you click those 3 lines at the top, it will prompt you to this screen. The app always generates with just the alphabet on it. And so you'll see this first row. That's what the app will generate with, but it also allows you to click additional tiles that you need for that word chain provided on the lesson plan. You can click a whole row by touching the all button, or you could clear it by clicking none. As you can see, once again, only sounds that can go at the beginning of a word or in the initial placement are in blue. Any sound that can go in the medial placement is yellow. And then things or sounds that can go in the final placement are in green. Here in pink, once again, you can click silent E for words, but also unclick it by using the blank pink tile. And again, you can do the same thing here with S and ES in words. One thing to point out is that we do have consonant clusters on the app so that it can function with initial and final sounds. However, as is discussed in the manual, we do not recommend that these are taught as individual or as one sound. They should be addressed as individual sounds. So for example, for the word snack, we would still want students to sound out snack, because they are not individual sounds or they are individual sounds, not their own grapheme. I apologize, it's very late. Here is a closer look at a teacher utilizing the blending board app on the screen. As you can see, she's utilizing a smart pen on the board where she can quickly and efficiently click the tiles that she needs to create the new word. She can also provide that segmenting and blending support of the word. Here's another example of that. Once again, being close to the screen is an important component in order to make this step efficient. As Holly mentioned, as you are beginning the school year, thinking about where you're placing your computer and other equipment is really important, and again, in order to ensure that you are delivering efficient lessons. If you do not have the blending board accessible to you, you can present students with words using graphing cards or simply writing the words on the whiteboard. The important part is that you are presenting the words for the students and students are practicing decoding of these words. And once again, these words only have previously taught graphemes in them. For the lesson slide decks, for these slides, you do not need to use them. It just prompts you to open the UFLI Blending Board app, which was linked in the chat. We highly recommend that you bookmark this app because it is one that you will use weekly for your lessons. So once again, the pace of this step is very important because the blending drill is now to build decoding automaticity. So students should be responding by segmenting the sounds and then reading the word quickly. If students read a word incorrectly, it's important to use that same type of correction procedure that we went over earlier, where you are modeling the correct response or reading of the word. You're guiding the students through the reading of the word, and then you're asking the students to provide that core response without your support. And it's really important across these warm-up steps or really throughout the whole lesson. And while students are reading words in the blending drill, that they are producing blendable sounds. So when sounds are continuous, we want to make sure that students are stretching those out. And for stop sounds, we want to help students avoid adding those schwa. So once again, the blending drill is approximately 5 minutes. For this step, the teacher or you are presenting a word with concepts that have been previously taught, and students are reading the words orally. Once again, this app is intended for you to use and manipulate. Students are just focused on segmenting and blending the sounds in order to read the words. The goal of this step is to develop students' decoding automaticity. And once again, you are the one manipulating the tiles in order to help your students practice decoding. Now, since I've talked so much and I'm getting all tongue twisted, I'm going to hand it back to Holly to finish up day 1 with the new concept step.
Thanks, Valentina. And step 5, the new concept, is probably the most important step of the lesson. It's where you are very explicitly teaching kids about the new concept, whether that's a grapheme phoneme correspondence or a morpheme or a spelling rule. You are explaining it very clearly. So for this step of the lesson, this is going to take you approximately 15 minutes. It's about half of day 1. And for this, you will need your lesson slides, and your students will need their writing utensil and their writing surface. So something to write on and something to write with. They'll also use some spelling strategies during this particular step, and we'll talk about those real briefly. All right, so because it's so important that the explanation of these concepts is very clear and direct, we provide recommended teacher language. You don't have to follow this word for word, but I would if I were teaching these lessons. It just is already thought through how to explain this very clearly. And the language on your lesson plans aligns exactly with the lesson slides. So when you are teaching this and you're just reading this particular language, you will have these slides come up. So a consonant digraph is when 2 consonants come together to make one sound. You've already learned about a consonant digraph. At this point, you'll have the CK slide up. We've talked about CK. When C and K are together at the end of a word, they make one sound. The 2 consonants S and H have their own sounds, S and H. But when these consonants come together in words, they make one new sound, sh, like at the beginning of the word sheep. So that just very clear initial explanation is really important. One of the other things that's important when you're teaching a new grapheme is that kids need to know, well, where in a word can that particular grapheme appear? So the next slides go over that, and the next part of the recommended teacher language follows. The consonant digraph SH can come at the beginning of a word, such as ship and shop, and the consonant digraph SH can come at the end of a word, such as fish and wish. So these slides are animated so that you can put these words up as you are saying them. Another thing to note, and this is probably obvious by this point, anything between the slanted lines or the virgules are sounds that you'll produce, the phoneme. And when you see a capital letter, you're going to say the letter name. So you're connecting that grapheme and that phoneme. The next part of introducing the new concept is explaining the articulatory gesture. So one of the things that's really important to know when you're teaching these lessons is that a really critical piece of this is developing kids' phonemic awareness. So as educators, we were always taught that a phoneme is the smallest unit of sound in spoken language, which is a true but incomplete explanation of what a phoneme is. A phoneme is the smallest unit of sound, but it's also the physical act used to produce the sound, or the mouth movement, or the articulatory gesture. So one of the things that we connect with the graphemes is what's going on with your mouth as you're making this particular sound. So the language for this would be to make the sh sound, put your teeth together and round your lips like this. Shh. Pull your tongue back toward the back of your mouth. Be sure your voice is off because this is a quiet sound. Shh. The sh sound is a continuous sound that can be stretched out. Watch me. Shh. You try. Shh. Okay, so all of this is just built in so that you can explain very clearly to your students exactly what it is you want them to know. Once you have talked about the articulatory gesture, the sound wall card is on the screen. You will take the actual sound wall card and add it to your consonant grid at this point. So you're adding at this point the SH to that particular sound wall. So here's a quick clip of a teacher, Valentina, introducing this. Okay. And then the next piece of this is practicing letter formation. So these are a particularly important part of the initial alphabet introduction lesson. So I think it's 1 through 34. The letter formation is a big focus. For later lessons, it will say practice letter formation, and that's an option for you if your students still need it. But for those initial lessons, one of my favorite things is that we have built into the slides a little video example of the lesson being, or the letter being formed. So you would model yourself the directions for the for forming the letter, and that language is in the alphabet lessons. And then you can have the video model it as well. So while this is being modeled, so this is an N, while this is being modeled, I can walk around and watch students to make sure they're doing it correctly, and this video continues on a loop. To me, this is a great feature. One of the things that I would like to use as well with this is having kids actually point and looking at their arm kind of like a pencil, making the letter with their finger, practicing that letter formation over and over again, and doing that along with it. So after they've written it on their dry erase board, have them practice it some more. We also have, for this particular step, practice reading and spelling words. This is a really important part. As soon as kids have learned the grapheme phoneme correspondence, we want them to apply it. So for each lesson, there are some read words and some spell words. So the read words are laid out on the slides. And again, I don't know if you can see it on these slides, but you have the slideshow mode icon in the corner. That's important because you want those slides to be in slideshow mode because those words are animated, and you can have one come up at a time, and that will be the one you're focusing on. When you get to the spelling practice, you'll see the lined paper slides, and this gives you an opportunity to spell, and then it'll prompt you to do let's spell together. So the let's read together, watch me read, let's read together, watch me spell, let's spell together. This corresponds with the I do and the we do for each of these. So let's watch Valentina do the I do part.
There is a word by saying each sound, watching first. Then I said each sound. Then I put the sound. You ready to try it with
Okay, so that was the I do. Now let's watch her do some we do practice.
Very good reading. Here we go. More sounds. Say favorite sound. I-C-S-E has an X.
Pretty straightforward. And for this spelling, the same kind of thing happens. First, the teacher will model a word, and then the kids will do the we do. For the spelling part, what we recommend is that you use a spelling strategy. The two that we recommend are Elkonin boxes and pound and sound. So if you're using Elkonin boxes, you would go through these steps. These are explained in the manual as well. You would start by counting the sounds, draw one box for each sound, insert the letter or letters for each sound. And in the case of the word fish, you would put the two letters SH in one box because they represent one phoneme. And then you would have students write the whole word under the boxes and then read the word. Elkonin boxes tend to work better when you are doing one-on-one support or in small group supplemental instruction. For whole class, we tend to see pound and sound working better. So the idea for pound and sound is you want to prompt the students to pound a fist. So they would say the word. So if I'm spelling fish, I would say fish, and then I would sound it out. Ish. And the sounding part is the segmenting. And as I'm segmenting, I would write each letter. So students write the letters to spell the word. If you are doing a multisyllabic word, then you're pounding once for each syllable. So if I'm spelling the word lobster, I would say lobster. Okay, let's go back and think. The first one is lob. Sound it out. Lob. Then stir, stir. And I would write each grapheme as I come up with the phoneme. So there are multiple ways that you can do this. Writing out the words is the simplest way if your kids are able to do that quickly. What we have seen is that early in kindergarten, before kids have the fine motor skills to write their letters, using some of the other manipulative letters, either the magnetic letters or the word mat can work really well instead of having them have to write. So in summary, for the new concept, step 5, this takes about 15 minutes total. The introduction needs to include the discussion of the placement and example words. It includes the explanation of the articulatory gesture. Letter formation practice as needed. So if your students are pretty proficient with their letter formation, then you're not going to worry as much about that. But then in that case, you would probably spend more time doing word reading and spelling. So that is our day 1 lesson. So in the second part of this that we are going to come back to on Wednesday, I believe, we are going to go over day 2. So we've got day 1 that has steps 1 through 5. Day 2, we will do talk about a new concept review and then take you through steps 6, 7, and 8. So we have a few minutes for questions if anybody has any at this point. And we also recommend that you visit our website and follow us on social media to get some more information. We do have a new Facebook group that's designed specifically to support teachers in their use of foundations. So I believe it's called UFLI Foundations Community.
All right. Yes, we do have some questions for you, Dr. Lane and Dr. Contest. The first one is, if students in first grade or second grade have never been exposed to this type of learning focus, would you recommend starting at like the kindergarten level lessons?
If students have never had any phonics instruction, is that what that means?
I guess they mean like this intense of like systematic and explicit phonics instruction.
I I think it's more a matter of what they have learned. So a lot of kids tend to pick up a lot of phonics instruction or a lot of phonics skills, even if they haven't been explicitly taught. So in that case, I would do some assessment with my kids and kind of pick the lowest common denominator. What are things that what are the first skills in our scope and sequence that you would have some kids that still need? It's not going to hurt kids who have those skills to review them, but you want to make sure that you are addressing everyone's needs. If you have a couple of kids who are way behind the rest, then you might be better served by pulling those kids for small group instruction to help get them caught up and start at a place where a larger number of kids are still needing support.
Perfect, thank you. And then the second question we have is, do you recommend first graders or essentially first graders do letter formation, the letter formation parts of the getting ready lessons, if schools are already using a handwriting published curriculum outside of UFLI Foundations?
Yeah, if letter formation is being systematically taught, then I don't think it's particularly important. What's important is that kids get time with explicit instruction in letter formation. If they're getting it elsewhere, then what I would probably do is just do a very quick review, not spend as much time as is designated in the lesson for it, just to make sure that the kids are keeping up.
Perfect. No, that makes complete sense. Always wanted to check everything with them just to make sure they get it all. And then the last question, which kind of I thought was interesting, is kind of putting it all together. What would you expect from a child who goes through all of these lessons? Like, these are lessons meant to be from K-2 mastery at the end. What would you expect from a child that goes through all of these lessons?
All the way through kindergarten, first and second grade, I would expect a pretty proficient reader. So at that point, they would know how to read words. Now, UFLI Foundations does not address the language comprehension side of reading. And so it's certainly not enough to just learn how to do these phonics skills, but it is extremely important. So the way that I like to think about it is this is absolutely essential, but it's not sufficient. You also need to be developing kids' language comprehension, their vocabulary, their syntax, their background knowledge, and so forth. And if you're doing that and UFLI Foundations, you're going to have really proficient readers.
Awesome, which I think is the ultimate goal of what every teacher and everyone that's listening right now, what we want all of our little kiddos to be doing. Wonderful.
If you didn't see the first webinar, we did share some of the data from our pilot schools in that webinar. And we were even kind of surprised at how incredibly effective it was. We had the smallest effect size that we had was a 1.2, which is extremely strong effects. So we have been very excited to see this implemented and yield such really good skills with kids. So I think if you do implement it with fidelity and go through the steps as we are describing them, you are very, very likely to see very good results.
Wonderful. And I know we didn't get to every single question that was here today. So if you have additional questions, my colleagues will pop our UFLI email into the chat box, but you can also go to our website, any of our social media, and ask us questions there. We know everyone, when you start rocking and rolling with this, you're going to get those questions. So just feel free to email us and we'll get back to you as soon as we can.
Yeah, your best bet is to go to the Facebook group, because you will get a faster response. And chances are, if you have a question, some other teacher out there has the same question. So you're not just helping you do it better, you're helping other teachers do it better when you get your questions answered there.
Definitely. I love seeing all the chit chat that's happening on there. It's very fun.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And we hope you are enjoying getting to know foundations. And we hope you'll join us again on Wednesday for the second half of the lesson. Steps 5 again, and 6, 7, and 8.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.